All right. So let's start. So this is Bruce Krakowski. Bruce, why don't you introduce yourself? And tell us, besides introducing yourself, why don't you tell us why you agreed to do this with me? They need to know, like, Bruce and history and Star Trek interest and that sort of stuff, and then say, this is why I agreed to do it.
Howdy. My name is Bruce. I'm Bruce, a friend of Kevin's, and I am a fan of Star Trek, and he knows that, and he invited me into this participate in this video. What would you like to know? I was born a poor black child.
A lot has changed since then, Bruce. A lot has changed. So, I've known Bruce for gosh, it's been over 30 years. I was thinking it was 30 years, but then I said, no, it's been over 30. So probably 35 years now, right? And Bruce has always impressed me. He was my lead at a place where I used to work. Very smart guy, incredibly smart. About everything, Bruce actually introduced me to Star Trek because I don't know that I'm a Star Trek fan, but I'm very fascinated by the world of Star Trek. It fascinates me. And Bruce fascinates me. And the fans of Star Trek fascinates me. And the way that Star Trek has taken off is also fascinating. So Bruce grew up, and why don't you tell him about, I asked you last time how you got introduced to Star Trek, and you told me a great little story about, if I'm not mistaken, you and your father. It was really your father who introduced you, and you had a really great little moment with your father in Star Trek. Is that right?
I have a glimpse, a memory of father watching an episode of Star Trek in 1966 while I'm lying my head on his lap and we're on the couch and we're watching Who Mourns for Adonis. And that's my memory. I consider myself a first-generation Trekkie because of that one memory, even though really I didn't start watching Trek until like after 73 or so, which is probably the real beginning. But because I remember that one episode, I'm a first-generation Trekkie there. I'd like to squeeze myself into that category. In 1973, no, it has to be 75, I had already seen the Making of Star Trek book on the shelf. I've already seen, I think, Matt Jeffries' book, The Technical Manual. It could be vague around there because I remember being in the 9th grade and someone walked across the library holding a book, and that was that book, The Making of Star Trek. So that book had to be later. And I said, that looks interesting. What does the making of Star Trek mean? I don't understand that. I didn't understand the phrase, the making of, but it looked interesting and I had heard of Star Trek, must have, went to the bookstore, ordered the book way back when. That's how it was done. And read that book and, well, the rest is history. First episode that I think I consciously recorded with a 8mm camera because there was no Betamax, the Apple. I went into a bathroom in the center of the house, closed the door, no windows, had a 3-inch TV with an 8mm camera pointed at it and recorded the Apple. And then recorded Star Trek later with reel-to-reel recorders in the 70s were the big thing. What was it? We went to conferences. The Puget Sound Star Trekkers at the Pacific Science Center.
Now, what year was that? What year was that about?
So that had to be after 75. 75 would be the Making of Star Trek, me seeing the book and getting it. 76 would probably be the Puget Sound Star Trekkers at the Pacific Science Center. The conferences at the Sherwood Inn on 145th in the U District. Some other hotel-based, the way they used to be done. Not the chain cons that we have or had in the 80s and 90s where you'd have one room you'd go into and you'd watch the presentation and you'd go outside and see the huckster's room where they had junk to sell you. It was more intimate. Oh, they take over like science fiction conventions that I probably don't go to anymore and don't realize that they probably still exist. Like when a convention takes over a hotel room. Do they still do that anymore? Probably not. Maybe it's all probably changed. Where Creation Con, the big commercial convention organizers just take over one big conference room and you're watching one screen for the whole program instead of going from room to room and looking at your schedule and, oh, that's on the 3rd floor. And, oh, we're going to go to Portland and book our rooms so that we're at the convention. You know, that was the old days.
So was that like the first? So you were a Star Trek fan. You became a Star Trek fan. I mean, with your father, and then and something that people, I think is important for people to know about you is you are a techie guy. So when you're talking about recording it and stuff, I don't think a whole lot of people are doing that. I remember when I first met you, you had the huge laser discs. I think they were over 12 inches in, those laser disc things. And you also had a screen that you could pull down to block the rest of the room out. So you're like in a little movie theater. So I think that's important that people know that about you, that you are a techie kind of guy. So I think that what you bring to the table is a whole lot more than someone else who doesn't, because you've recorded them, you've watched them. I mean, I don't know if you could give someone an estimation of how many times you've seen like the first. Now we're going to have to define some stuff, like the first Star Trek episode that was showed on TV wasn't the first one that was recorded, and there's some reasons behind that. I'd also like to cover that with people too that are watching this channel, that there's a whole lot behind Star Trek, and a whole lot of different stories that we're going to be covering and stuff like that I'd like to come to. But just what you've brought to it in your own technology that you brought to watching Star Trek as a hobby of yours, right? I don't know if you want to call it a hobby, but what would you call it?
Definitely a hobby, an interest. Started in 73-ish, 75 it took off. Recording, you said audio tape, right? I recorded two reel-to-reel decks to try to preserve this so I can play it back at any time. And of course, the VHS and, Betamax wars and Laserdiscs. Sure, the late 70s, we had Laserdiscs, and I remember buying the very first diode-based, laser-based Laserdisc player, non-tube. Oh, I have a tube version too because I'm crazy. It'll be top loader. Bought Laserdisc. I got into that because I could get a higher quality video. And I bought industrial decks so I could hook them to my computer, and then I could control them with a database. I use a relational database to capture data, everything that they say. I've captured time codes and linked them to the Laserdisc player so that I could control and say, find all times that Scotty does not say beam me up. And it would then, if the disc was in there, it would automatically zip to it. Industrial decks, they moved in like a quarter of a second, poof, right to it. And I could see and watch on the screen and read what the episode was all about in that location. Then I did it with DVDs. I ripped the DVDs. Those images would just mount automatically. And I could just search for all instances across all episodes where someone said such and such, and then just say play, and it would mount, advance, play, go on to the next one. It was ridiculous. Yes, technology, certainly a part of this whole mess.
I think it's important for people to know as you're explaining this too, because they're going to go, how in the world does he do all this? Well, Bruce doesn't sleep. So we were just talking about that before we started this interview. So Bruce basically doesn't have this extra time because he doesn't sleep like the rest of them.
What's the episode with sound like you're cutting a diamond? We're supposed to know Star Trek, and so I need to have a list of all the episodes so I can just recall these and be like the trivia kings that you try to think that we are. Paradise Syndrome, Asteroid, right? And he doesn't sleep for ages. He just keeps looking at those codes and trying to decipher the musical notes, right? Yeah, Bruce doesn't sleep either. Back in 66, when I had a babysitter, the older brother of the person that I hung out with at that house where the babysitter was, had a remote control car. It was a Vida bus. And that brother took the top off to show me the insides, and I saw old Japanese, resistors and the wax that's paraffin that's poured over it as a sealer, and I said, and it was remote control. It didn't do much, right? It probably went left and right, and when you go backward, you could probably force the thing to change direction or something goofy. And when I saw that, I said, my house is going to have remote controls when I grow up. Little did we know that remote controls, nothing. Well, that got me into electronics. In 1974, middle school, 7th or 8th grade, I spoke with my mother. I discovered that she said, you can do anything you want. A big weight off of my shoulders. Really? I can do whatever I want? I don't have to follow anybody's footsteps or do what you expect? It was like, So from that moment on, it was technology, electronics class. Back then in the 70s, we had electronics class. Yeah. 4 years of Spanish 1 down the drain. No. 4 years of electronics.
Where did you go to school?
In the Pacific Northwest.
Because they didn't have electronics school where I
went. No, we had just invented dirt. right?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, it's a different geographic region. Yeah, it wasn't until I got into electronics in college, basically. Well, I actually dabbled with electronics, but more of your machinery type when I was growing up, rather than more like transistors and resistors, and that came later with my training. So I guess we're a couple techie guys that enjoy technical stuff, and I think we know quite a bit about it. As I'd say, way above a layperson's knowledge, I think we have quite a bit of knowledge as far as technology is concerned and stuff like
Kevin has quite a bit of knowledge. He's a business guy. I'm really impressed. He runs a business and deals with technology day to day. He probably has a Class A7 computer license, just like Spot, right?
Yeah, right. So on this channel, so that's a bit about Bruce. Me, I enjoy technology, and Bruce, like I said, was my lead at work, and I really enjoyed talking to Bruce and his knowledge of Star Trek, and of course his knowledge of a lot of stuff. You really do have quite a knowledge of things that I'm fascinated with, and so I get a great
very narrow part of life.
Maybe, but still very interesting. Very, very interesting. So that's and so I wanted to take this thing because when I graduated college, I moved in with Bruce for a minute, because Bruce, as soon as I moved in, I think it's important to say, as soon as I moved in, Bruce moved out. So I didn't know how to take that, whether to take it personally or just say, well, he was. Do you remember that? I mean, it was like 30 days later. You moved in with that guy that did the backups for Outback. Remember that? And his wife.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
it was all your fault.
I was just there looking at Laserdisc and trying to find a job. That was right after I got out of college. You remember? And I guess that was my introduction to Star Trek, right? Because you had all those big. Were they called Laserdiscs? They were Laserdiscs, right?
Yeah. 12-inch Laserdiscs.
Were they 14-inch, or were they 12-inch?
12-inch, just the same size as an LP. Double-sided.
Okay. So double-sided, I remember that too. Yeah, double-sided.
So that 30 minutes on one side in constant angular velocity, which had a lot of special effects, freeze frame, forward, back, and 60 minutes per side-ish, constant linear velocity. 2 episodes, 40 discs, 80 episodes of Star Trek. I always wanted to have the industrial changer that Pioneer made with those industrial decks that I got, where I would have the 20 changers, 2 of them, and load all the discs up, and I could just play all of the discs at the same time. Yeah.
Right. So then what we want to do is, I think we want to just, in what I imagine, is just start covering Star Trek. I've read a lot about Star Trek, and I've watched a lot of stuff. I see there's a lot of Star Trek. I found one today, Bruce. I think there's Star Trek Continues, and then there's Star Trek Generation 2 or something like that. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. Right. I watch Continues and New Voyages. Those guys merged to some degree. Very high quality 4th season kind of shows. Very good.
Yeah. So I don't think we're going to get into those unless, as we go along, we decide we want to start covering those. But I think what we want to do is, in my mind, is start with the first one that was broadcast, right? Or I don't know if you want to cover the first pilot that was done, which they made into the 2-part thing. And I'll get a cheat sheet too of what is what as far as the episodes are concerned. But is that how you kind of see this channel going?
No, you invited me and said, hey, let's talk about Trek. It's pretty fun. And I thought, are you kidding? Who likes this thing? This is just me and the safety of 4 walls watching Trek. I think it would be everybody does that, right? Starts at the first episode, aired, and goes in air order. That's one way to do it. And I think it would be appropriate to do that until we get to episode 15 or 16, whatever it is, the menagerie, and then go, okay, here's the menagerie, and this is how it evolved from the pilot, the cage. What pieces did they pull? What's different? I think that would be a normal first attempt. Everybody has watched the aired episodes, and the cage, the first pilot, is, well, it's out there, and people may have seen that, but we could just reference it when we get to the menagerie and show how those pieces were pulled into the menagerie.
By air date, go by air date. Now, what about some of the information, the really interesting information on people that were involved in the making of Star Trek and what they had to say? Will we work that in as we're covering the episodes, or should we kind of do it's one or two or three of those on their own as we go along?
Oh,
like the book you told me to get, I actually bought it. It just came in. It's really funny. The book was like $1.50, I think, when it sold. I think I paid $8 or $16. I can't remember what I paid for it. And it was saying it's good condition. I'm not sure it's in good condition. I don't know how they grade it. It's in okay condition. I would say it's marginally okay, but readable. It's readable. So with the books and the other stuff, that's also part. And I also want to say about you, one of the things that did amaze me is you have a great deal of models, and I don't remember if they're all Star Trek models. And I asked you something about making them, and I remember you go, making them? Who makes these? I imagine they're still wrapped in their plastic. You still have them on a shelf somewhere, still protected. Are those Star Trek models, or which ones are those?
I have two sets of models with different kinds of goals. I have a model, I bought models in the 70s and just kept buying, and then stopped, let's say 80s or 90s. Hey, this is getting too crazy. My original idea when I was young was I'd buy enough of the ships, 12 enterprises, right? Constitution-class ships, and build them all so I could say I have the fleet. Right? So I think I have 10 original Constitution-class starships in their original box, AMT. I'm sure there's different companies, different versions, different things. And I thought I would, when I retire, I'd get the patience to spread out and learn model making. And then I have another set of models that are completely unrelated, very small, just cars I've owned. But Star Trek models, actually building them, well, yeah, I'd like to try again. I did as a kid, right? Building testers, glue, and didn't do anything with airbrushing. Don't know anything about that, and I don't think I've had the patience then. And I look forward to do that in retirement, a little project maybe. It's much easier now to get much higher quality ones when you go to Amazon, right? And say, oh my God, $80. And it's perfect, and it's nothing way better than I, with no modeling skills, could do. And I've never really
that big auction that they did of all the Star Trek stuff, did you pick up any of that, or did you bid on any of it?
I participated in some auctions, and so that still goes on. There's a bunch of auction houses. I like watching the video of Christie's auctioning off some stuff, but you can find this on YouTube. And then I participated in the early 90s with what's the auction house called? Can't think of it right now. Starts with a P. And so people were getting rid of their things. Matt Jeffries, his estate, other things. And yeah, I picked up a couple of things. The hardware is pretty expensive. I remember getting a push button. The kind of button that you see that's on the wall in the Enterprise corridor to Kirk will pound in order to get the intercom to work, or the same white domed button that you'll find on his chair. No documentation on it, but looks fairly authentic to me. And some drawings that some Matt Jeffries drew up. I have something on the aliens weapon from the episode In a Wink of an Eye.
Right.
So a couple things from those auction days, and I got out of that real quick. That can just go like crazy. I remember, and so what's his name? Paul Allen bought a ton of this stuff for the Science Fiction Museum, and so you can see all that stuff. And I remember bidding essentially against his people bidding, and there were the little floppy disks, the discs that you would put in on the bridge. They were made out of wood, and one of the sides was had an angle on it, and the rest of it was just a little square piece of wood painted color. And they had 3 of them or something like that for bid. And, beginning bid was like $200. I go, okay, yeah, I can probably go. You know,
Wow.
before you know, it was $800, and it's like, I'm out of this, and then it goes up from there.
For a piece of wood.
Just for a piece of wood.
But it was used in Star Trek.
Yeah, right.
So I think we should cover conventions a little bit, because I don't know much about conventions, and I know, and also I'd like to cover, like, we were talking before about Trekkie versus Trekor, and I'm going to just say this up front. I think it's hilarious. I think that we're way too PC in this world, and for someone to say, and so I was looking, what is a Trekkie versus Trekor? And some lady goes, I'm not a Trekkie, I'm a Trekor, and she was so adamant about not being classified. I guess a Trekkie is kind of like someone that follows someone around or something. I'm not sure what the difference is, but
an extreme fan, a Trekkie, and that started way back when, I'm sure in the 60s, when people called in to try to rescue Star Trek. Fans would be Trekkies. They're over, probably the average public would say that they are the extreme fan. Whatever, there's fans in all sorts of things, right? And that was the word, Trekkie. But then some people were offended by that connotation, and I believe that it's Trekker. I consider myself a Trekkie. That's the original word, and what's the problem? And now, of course, it's all different, right? We have media everywhere, and there's geeks everywhere, and nerds everywhere, and we all are into our 2-season only. Why don't you keep making that shows? And we're all nerds and Trekkie. I think, some people were offended by. I am not a Trekkie. I'm a Trekker.
A Trekkie. So I think one thing that's going to differentiate their channel than some of the other ones I've seen is, like, some people they get into it, and for production quality. Yeah, we got great production quality. So.
That's what's going to distinguish us, is the poor production quality.
Oh, the poor production. Oh, I thought you were saying just production quality. I was thinking quality up. No, but one of the things is, I think we've got, I hear people that just talk about it, or they give their opinions on the episode itself, which I think is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Or the ones that I think are less quality, though, are the ones that tell me what happened during the episode. I can pretty much watch it myself to know what's going to happen in the episode, right? And it kind of make my own. So those ones don't interest me as much. But I do like listening to some people's opinions if they have an opinion on it. There's some, I think what I'd like to do is talk about the seasons and the quality of the seasons and what you think about the seasons. There's some that, I know that a lot of people, and I think so too, that it dropped off in the third season. We were talking about how the budget just wasn't there during the third season. Those are some things that I'd like to talk about. The Spectre of the Gun, or whatever that is, where there was just 3 guys in a black, like a green screen, like I am right now. So that kind of thing there. Also, just what they did in production too, like changing the color of the sky to make it look like a different planet. I thought that was kind of fascinating. But talking about what was going on, I think Gene Roddenberry, in the first season was pretty well involved in the first season. I think he dropped off during the second season, right?
Right. At some point, I believe I read in our books where he said that he would lose his leverage if he didn't actually quit when he said he would quit, right? I need this to happen. You're ruining it. Either you go or I go, right? You'd say something like that, right? And I think he was kind of, he says he was forced into that situation. He had to finally then say, okay, then I'm gone. And in the third season, he was probably hardly involved at all. And those kind of stories are in our classic book, the books that we'll probably mention. Oh, this is a good book. Or, The Making of Star Trek is where you have to begin. Right.
So I think maybe starting to wrap this one up, but our next one would be what? Do you want to cover the first broadcast one, or would you like to talk about behind the scenes a little bit, and then maybe move into the first one after this second YouTube production?
We could talk about all of the episode order. Okay, so start with the first aired one, and then all the trivia associated with it or around it that we discover, like, oh, we were watching this and aired, but it was actually filmed in this order, and that's why these things don't match episodes. We could introduce trivia as we're going along, or things we think are odd. Should we talk about books or the making of Star Trek before it even started? Yeah, sure. We should have some lead in. No, we should talk about whatever the heck we want. It's our conversation. Don't care about it's two guys just talking. Who cares about
We're just talking.
They'll tune in if they want to.
I think we kind of need a plan. I think we need to kind of say, like, whether or not we just kind of launch into it. I do love, I'm more of a behind-the-scenes kind of guy, to be honest with you. I mean, I like the episodes, but I love listening to the behind-the-scenes. I love the controversy and this is how this happened. No, this really isn't how this happened, right? It's just fascinating to me, right? To hear, well, that really, like Major O'Barrett, like, well, they didn't want a woman captain. Well, that's not really true. There was a lot of women that were very prominent during the time when that was made, and they just didn't want Major O'Barrett to be, the prime. So that turns me on a lot. So I'd like to discuss that as we go along. But that one was actually, wasn't the first episode that was broadcast, as we said. That was the original pilot. And then they changed the pilot, and that's when you got William Shatner. Leonard Nimoy was, of course, on the first one. And a lot of the other crew that came in on the second pilot. So I guess it's really kind of hard for me to figure out where we want to start with this thing.
We'll just start and talk. And you like the trivia thing, the behind-the-scenes stuff. We're bound to find stuff. I have some wonderful books with behind-the-scenes stuff. Maybe I reread that and say, I read this. Now, everything that we say, of course, is hearsay, and we're not certain what we're reading, and did we interpret it correctly? This is all our opinions, right? So we'll throw a bunch of junk out there, and everybody's going to go, wait a minute, I read something different. Well, of course you did, because I can't read very well. I can't comprehend very well, and I interpret in my mind something completely different. Oh my God, Gene Roddenberry said this. No, we didn't. He said it, right? So we'll just throw some stuff out and see if it, not if it sticks. We'll just throw some stuff out there and create new rumors.
If it resonates. Well, that, and of course people are going to have their opinions, so they're going to be able to write in or let us know and stuff like that. So that will actually bring some more stuff to the table. So yeah, that I think, okay, so we'll start with the original. So the next one is going to be next Saturday. And Bruce and I are going to talk about the first broadcast episode of Star Trek, the original series.
The Man Trap, right? September 8th, 1966.
Yeah, one that you didn't see at that time.
What's that?
Which one? The episode that you first saw, which was broadcast, was which one again?
Who Mourns for Adonis?
And that was
that's the one with Apollo.
Apollo, was it that second season or no? What was that first season?
First season. Yeah, we're not trivia guys here, so we'll have to have our wiki up, right, to look at this stuff from Memory Alpha or whatever.
Right.
Air date, Who Mourns, so that we don't have these lags in there that you're going to cut out all the good stuff, right? Yeah. Here we go. September 22nd, 1967, that second season.
So you watched something in the first season. If you watched it in 1966, that was first season.
No, I don't have any recollection of anything. I only have a recollection in the 60s of that one episode, 1967. I consider myself first generation because I saw that second, a memory of that second season episode. My mother didn't let us watch Star Trek. My mother had to be out of the house.
How many people now can say that? I mean, you're like one of the only. I didn't ever watch Star Trek until I saw it on your 12-inch disc race. Disc guns. Ray guns.
Yeah. No. Ray gun. So we watched, at that time, we watched Laserdisc because that was the best quality we could get. DVDs weren't out yet, right? And we were watching it on a 27-inch NEC tube that had a bunch of wires coming out of the back that I soldered to the board on the inside so that I could have the knobs to adjust the geometry on the outside of the TV instead of having to fiddle with tools on the inside. So I built this umbilical cord with 12 different knobs and switches and potentiometers that went to the back of the TV so I could just make, because you know how they design TVs, or how the tube TVs are. The image is overscanned, right? as voltage fluctuates, you can't tell that the size of the image is changing, right? Because it's beyond the edge of the tube. Well, I didn't want to lose any information. I wanted to know that when Nigel Barrett, Nurse Chapel, took one of those little salt shakers of Matt Jeffries and put it onto the sick bay bed wall ledge, I wanted to be able to see that, even though it was cut off at the edge of the screen, by putting all of the screen into the image on the tube. And I needed those knobs to make those changes because different brightness images made it grow and shrink. And so it would vary depending on what kind of show I might watch. Yeah, those were the days.
So tell me, so there's three things that people need to take into consideration here. One, we didn't have streaming media. We didn't have the internet. And you're talking about tube TVs, you realize that, right? If we have any tube TVs left, I have no idea where they're at.
Right.
They're pretty much flat.
I have two tube monitors in the house stored away to be able to hook up to some old computers.
Okay.
Yeah, but no tube TVs. Oh, right. No. Yeah, people don't realize.
And I don't think another thing is what you have were not remastered, right?
This is all standard def, 640 by 480, before any remastering. The audio came first, I think, when the DVDs were released in the 90s or something. We had several improvements. We had audio, and this is before the Blu-ray release, right? With remastering. Yeah. I hear that they were scanned at 4K, so that means they were released on 2K Blu-ray. That means we still have a chance before we die for them to come out again and have to buy it again. How many cents? How many cents have I bought? Audio tapes with reel-to-reel bought audio tapes, the tape from Radio Shack to record all of them, VHS in the late 70s, Laserdisc in the early 80s, DVD set prior to the sound being improved. I don't remember what the deal is. I have to look at my stuff. The first set, DVD re-release. First time it was released one or two episodes per package. Second DVD release, which has closed captioning or something extra on it. We'll have to look at that. And then finally later, Blu-ray. Oh my gosh. A lot of money.
Okay. A lot of money. And your auction purchase. And your model. So anyway, all right. So we're going to wrap this up. I think this has been great. I think it's a great kickoff. Next time we're going to cover The Man Trap. We'll go from there. And then the week after that, episode 2, which I'm going to pull them up so that I know what I'm saying here. And we'll go from there. What do you think? Good?
I think we can talk about episodes, and we can talk about stuff that's behind the scenes, because you're going to be interested in that. And whatever you're passionate about is important. And controversy will make interesting episodes, right?
I think we'll have to say what we think about the episode, right? Because a lot of people, they don't like the Man Trap, but there's certain things on certain episodes that I have noticed, and I know it all has to do with time and stuff like that, but I'd also like to put those kind of things, like what's your feeling about a certain episode? Did you really like it? Did you not like it so much? Also a grading of how you felt about the episode.
I would love to hear from you when you watch these episodes. So I don't know if we're watching them ahead of time or we're watching them simultaneously, right? And we're discussing. I would like to hear from you just like you mentioned, what parts, you might not like the whole thing, but there's elements of the show that you go, oh, I'd like to know what that is. Maybe we'll find that some stuff overlaps, or we'll find out what specific kinds of things we like about the writing or the filming, the cinematography or whatever. Yeah, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, cool. Great. All right, then let's wrap this up. Cool? Thank you, Bruce.